Welcome to the third and final episode of We Out of Pride for 2023. I'll be back in 2024 with much more and hopefully some special guests. 2023 was a bit of an interesting season for our AFLW team with some mixed results during the home and away portion, including a couple of losses at home and another unexpected one against the Saints late in the season. And that loss ultimately cost us a shot at winning the McClellan Trophy. But aside from the $1 million bonus, I don't think it was too big of a deal personally. Interestingly, Melbourne won that prize for being the most consistent club during home and away rounds in the AFL and AFLW seasons. However, they bombed out in straight sets during both finals campaigns, making a mockery of the whole thing anyway. So that's their issue, not ours. So once the final series rolled around for the women, our Lions stepped it up a gear by beating the Crows away in a heartstopper at Norwood Oval before heading home and taking care of a spirited Cats outfit a fortnight later. That was actually a pretty good game for the most part and got pretty wild in the end as the result looked like it could have gone either way. And there was a bit of controversy from Patrick Dangerfield regarding the umpiring late in that game. And that led to the Cats fans expelling enough salt to keep the fish and chip industry running for the next decade. I thought that was pretty funny at the time and even now in reflection. But look, let's be honest here, umpiring in both the men's and women's games is a disgrace at all times. And not one team is immune to how shocking it is. Some teams appear to get a bit more favoured than others, but I don't think that's the case. The umpires are just terrible all the time in the men's and women's. And look, personally, I don't believe the Cats would have been a deserving grand finalist anyway. It probably would have been absolutely pummeled by North had they made it. So the right team won through to the big dance, as it ultimately proved by our ladies winning the Cup at Icon Park in front of a solid 12,000 or so spectators. And I just want to say something on that. I know the grandstands on the other side of the ground are pretty old and condemned and whatever, but surely if they're going to hold big events such as this and big VFL games and so forth at Icon Park, they should be doing something about the opposite side of the ground to where everyone sits, putting some sort of seating facilities in there for people. Seeing two empty grandstands on the side that the cameras are pointing at wasn't a good look. My personal opinion. You can agree or disagree. So I was fortunate enough to be at the grand final with my kids, and we finally broke what appeared to have been my own personal hoodoo of losses. I'd previously been to the men's grand finals in 04 and 23, plus a women's decider in 18, all of which were losses after we'd led all three games at various stages. And on top of that, I was present when Fitzroy lost to the Hawks in the 92 Foster's Cup final. I know it was a hell of a long time ago. And Brisbane's lost to Carlton in the 07 NAB Cup. So you can imagine my anxiety when I walked through the gates. And by three-quarter time at the game, North had a pretty good run on the scoreboard as well. Some pretty incredibly one-sided umpiring decisions that seemed to go their way. But as has often happened in challenging games, our girls found another level to rise to and use their superior fitness to run all over the top of their opponents. The win, look, it certainly silenced the pro Kangaroos crowd who were up and about for a lot of the day. And I've got to admit, there are a lot of just your regular male bogan-type football supporters. It wasn't just, like in the early days, there was a lot of females, a lot of sort of, I gotta choose my words carefully, what people might be termed as woke type males as well. But there was just your regular everyday Kangaroo supporters there. Brisbane supporters the same, but we were massively outnumbered, admittedly. You get that. It didn't really make a difference to the result in the end. And, it put certain media figures in their place when we did win the game, for doubting that the team has played in all but one final series in the history of the AFL competition is never, ever mentioned at the start of a season as being in contention. It's always written off. They've lost this player, they've lost that player. How are they going to get the goals? How are they going to win games? This and that. Haven't got a home ground previously. The year we did miss it, I think we missed out by about 4 points in the last round. It cost us a couple of percentage points in that. really skewed and dumb conference style fixture where I think we actually finished with a better record than a couple of clubs that made it from the other conference, but it is what it is. So, yeah, in the grand final, skipper Brie Conan was awarded best on ground for her outstanding performance down back early on before switching to a midfield role in the last quarter, possibly during the third quarter. I can't remember exactly. I was running on not much sleep and a hell of a lot of adrenaline. But also a lot of anxiety as well because things didn't seem to be going our way, but it did improve. So, yeah, you couldn't really doubt Conan's dominance throughout the game, which was ably backed by Belle Dawes and Nat Ryder, two absolute guns, and they figured in the votes at the end of the day for the medal as well, which I don't know if it has a name, but it was presented by Erin Phillips, who my son and I bumped into pre-game, and she's actually not as tall as we thought she'd be, but really nice lady, and yeah, obviously a great footballer, so she deserves to present that medal. I think she's won it about 2 or 3 times. Personally, I thought that Sophie Conway and Ola O'Dwyer were excellent on the wings when the game was hot. And look, neither got a huge amount of disposals. Yeah, I felt that what they did with what they got was to blunt North's influence and create opportunities for our forwards to get on the scoreboard when the game was in the balance. And look, let's be real here. 2018 told us that you don't have to get much of the ball to be considered the best player on the ground by the judges, even if your own team doesn't rate you that highly. But that's another story for another day. Look, and overall, look, it was a brilliant performance by a brilliant team, coached brilliantly. That's the word you got to keep using. The history will now show the Lions to have featured in 5 grand finals, 2 premierships in 7 completed seasons, and every other grand final loss was by a goal or less. So, hey, what a team, right? And this has been achieved despite having to regenerate the playing list multiple times, year after year after year, and not having a home ground to train or play at until basically this year. It was like the old Fitzroy of the 80s and 90s, really, where, you know, they could be playing at Wilson Grange or they could be playing at Aspley or any one of the suburban Brisbane grounds at any given time. And, yeah, now they've got Brighton Homes Arena, which is a brilliant facility. I will get up there one day. Can't wait. It looks really good on the TV, and everyone I know who's been there raves about it. So, yeah, look, capping off a stellar season, Ali Anderson won the Club Champion Award from Belle Dawes, who also collected Best Finals Player and the Trademark Player Awards. Nat Ryder won the All for One Award, while Chucky Mullins was named our Rising Star for 2023. Anderson, Conway, and Dakota Davidson were also selected in the All-Australian team, which was great recognition for their seasons. And all 3 were incredibly consistent and dominant during the home and away period of the season as well. And as I mentioned earlier, I felt that Conway was somewhat underrated for her efforts in the grand final. Courtney Hodder finally won Mark of the Year after some weird fan voting early on. Saw her miss out on Mark of the Round. I think the Adelaide fans employed a few bots to do some voting for them, but that's history. It makes no difference now. Courts has won it, and that's the important thing. And a lot has already been spoken about on that topic. So all I'll say is that justice prevailed in the end, and my favourite AFLW player was a very deserving winner. So I want to say the best part about, in my opinion, our AFLW program going forward is that we've managed to keep the large majority of our premiership team together whilst topping up with some good talent. And more on that later, though. We've also secured Coach Craig Starcevich for another 2 years. And I don't need to tell you how great that is for the future of our women's team. So on to the men's list, and they had a smallish amount of regeneration as well, with a much maligned veteran flying the coop and one of the biggest fan favourites in the history of our Brisbane Lions era, unfortunately not continuing on with the club. We did, however, re-sign everyone we wanted to keep, including Dane Zorko for 1 more year, plus Devon Robertson and Brandon Starcevich until 2025 and hopefully beyond. Coming into the club during the trade and free agency period were Tom Duday, a mid-sized intercepting key defender from the Crows, who he secured as a free agent, and 200-centimetre key forward Brendan Ryan from the Hawks. Both boys are highly talented locals from my town, and I've seen a fair bit of their football over time when they were juniors and so forth. And Duday, unfortunately, is going to be out of action until mid-2024. That's pretty well publicised while he's recovering from an ACL reconstruction. Although Ryan should be ready to rock and roll as soon as footy kicks off. And I think he's most likely going to be a backup to Eric Hipwood and possibly Joe Danaher. He's sort of more of a permanent forward. I don't think he really plays in the ruck much, if at all. So he's probably not threatening to Darcy Fort's position, potential position in the team, I guess. It's probably more likely, as I said, to be the backup for Eric Hipwood. But look, if he plays his best footy at VFL level, he could definitely start putting the pressure down on, Hipwood, Danaher, Oscar McInerney, Fort, whoever. But yeah, I mean, that's good stuff, isn't it? That there's competition for spots. So we lost Tom Fullerton to Melbourne via trade, and I don't think he was really ever going to become a regular senior player for us. And look, he put in some really good efforts in some games where Oscar McInerney was injured or Gary Hipwood was out for a period of time. He played a bit up forward as well. Really, yeah, you can't fault anything he's done for the club. He was a real good bloke to have around the place as well, from all reports. Look, losing him, I feel that's why we picked up Brendan Ryan. Even though it's known in footy circles that we were keen on Ryan previously before the Hawks swooped on him. We just didn't have a pick in that mid-season draft when they got him. But yeah, what made the Ryan deal fall into place ultimately, though, was the departure of Jack Gunston, who decided he wanted to go back to Hawthorn after only one season with us. Look, we all know the story of Gunston's time at the club, so I won't go into any more detail, and do hope he finds whatever it is he was looking for when he requested a trade back down south. I hate to speak negatively of anyone who's represented that club, but I don't think there's too many supporters shedding too many tears. I thought he brought some good stuff in some games, and from what a lot of the boys have said, he did teach them a lot of stuff off field as well. So you've got to thank him for that, and I guess cut our losses and move on. So we also upgraded Bruce Revel to a rookie list spot. He's been plying his trade for our academy and VFL teams over the years. He's an exciting player with a big mercurial presence. And I reckon he'll be pretty hungry after having to do some really big hard yards before finally making it onto our list. I see him as a potential cover for Lincoln McCarthy. That's my opinion. That doesn't mean that's what the club sees him as. I think he's definitely adaptable to various other on-field roles if needed. He's one of those guys who can do pretty much anything you ask and does it wholeheartedly. Some other list changes were the retirements of club legend Daniel Rich, who I am going to do a future episode on, so I'll save everything about Richie for then. Absolute legend of the club, though. Knocked back big dollars from Western Australian clubs to stay in Brisbane. Never wavered from his loyalty. Gave everything he had to the club over a very long period of time through our darkest period in the Brisbane Lions history. So, yeah, like, what a man. Would have been good to see him get to the 300 games and or win a premiership, but footy's a cruel mistress sometimes. So the extremely unlucky Marcus Adams also retired. He'd suffered a number of injuries during his time with us, but ultimately he succumbed to a career-ending concussion the previous season, and he just never got back on the field. And yeah, finally, Nakia Cockatoo, a hugely talented footballer who, had we gotten him at the start of his career, would have absolutely lit it up big time for us. And unfortunately, Cocky arrived at a torrid time for him after a long injury-interrupted period at the Cats and was well past his best. Never quite got his body back to what it was as a youngster. Look, on behalf of all Lions fans, I feel like all three retiring players deserve the best of our wishes with their future endeavours. With Richie remaining to do some work at the club, so we'll still see his face around the place, which is a good thing because he's a ripper bloke. I don't think there's too many who could have a bad word to say about him, if anyone at all. Right, so Blake Coleman, Daryl McDowell White, and the barometer, Reese Matheson, were not offered new contracts. Matho had previously been put on a rookie list, I think delisted at some point and redrafted. So he sort of, I guess, had, if you want to put it this way, a couple of chances to establish himself. Couldn't quite get there. Coleman's landed on his feet at the strong Williamstown club in Melbourne in the VFL. He's playing a bit of footy up in Darwin at the moment as well. But look, he'll fit right in at Williamstown with their excellent culture. And they've got a good coaching group and a really good playing group. That's the team, the local team that I support when I'm not supporting Brisbane at Victorian games. So really good place. I reckon he'll love it there and they'll love him and everything he brings to the table. I'm not entirely sure what McDowell White is up to at this stage. I'm sure we'll hear something as that happens. Matho's been playing a bit of footy in Darwin as well during the summer months and is expected to find himself at a country Victorian club in 2024. There's a few sort of articles floating around saying there's a big country club fighting for his signature. So I guess that's something we'll hear about soon enough. He's definitely one of the hard luck stories of our recent successful period, where he's always been that rung below our best midfielders. You got to think his sort of position is, I guess, he's a backup for Lockie Neal and a couple of years previous, Jared Lyons. They're the guys he would have to knock out to get in the team. I know Lyons isn't in there as a regular anymore, but he's, I guess, that guy in front of Matho. But look, Matho's been an able replacement when he's been asked to step up. And just from a personal point of view, myself and my kids have always had wonderful dealings with him throughout the journey. And he's another local boy from here in Geelong where I live. So yeah, I do wish him really well going forward and all the best because, like Richie, he's one of those heart and soul sort of guys that you just love having around the joint. So on the coaching front, I think in a previous episode with Alicia, we spoke about Jed Adcock moving on. He's accepted a new role at North Melbourne. It's been probably only one season as our backline coach after doing a bit of a switcheroo with Murray Davis. And he'd spent a number of years looking after the forwards previously. And I think most would agree that we tightened up our defence under his tutelage and looked really good down back this season. And yeah, conversely, Murray Davis did some good things defensively with our forward group as well. So that kind of worked for us. We'll miss Jed, really good club man as a player as well back in his day. Probably unfairly moved on from the club at a time where he still had some good footy in him. That's the past. Can't change that. So his replacement as the backline coach is Dale Morris, former Western Bulldogs player. He was previously in charge of development at our club and by reports is highly regarded by the players. He's also a premiership player in 2016 and one of the toughest footballers the game has ever seen. Like, yeah, that's really handy. I think he played that grand final possibly with a break in his leg or his ankle or something. He played a lot of games with a broken back at one stage. Yeah, he's really, really, really tough. He'll bring a lot, actually. He'll bring a lot to our back line. I'm pretty sure he's brought a lot to the club already in his short sort of stay with us. Recently retired GWS player Daniel Lloyd steps in as Morris's replacement in the development space. Like that's, I guess, a work in progress and it remains to be seen how that'll play out. But I've got a few friends who are giant supporters and they just think the world of Lloydie. So I'll take their word for it. Seems like a good sort of guy with good head on his shoulders and a lot of leadership qualities. Now, I guess the biggest change from the coaching department is strategy coach Mark Stone not having his contract renewed. Now, I guess I should be careful here, but it is what it is. there's been rumblings throughout his tenure that he and Fagan didn't really get along too well, and Danny Daly wasn't overly impressed with his work ethic. I know they're not going to admit that. No one at the club's going to admit it. And they'll probably tell me to shut up. It is, like I said, what it is. Naturally, you can't believe everything you hear on the grapevine, though. However, where there's smoke, there's generally some fire. So, yeah, most fans would also agree that game day strategy is one area we can improve on immensely if we're going to challenge again. So it will be interesting to see where the club heads in that regard, particularly as Stone is not being directly replaced, with a preference seemingly for the job to be shared around the coaching group. And a couple of things that I wouldn't mind seeing worked on and improved on is that tendency to put the cue in the rack when we're got reasonable leads late in games. It's cost us a couple of times when we could have closed games out, and I guess may have in a couple of years previous cost us a bit of percentage on the ladder. But look, it's footy. Can't change what's happened in the past, but we can change what's happening in the future. The other thing too is the delivery of the ball to our forwards. It seems to be a thing that when plan A isn't working, of hitting them up on the lead or getting Chuck or McCarthy to get the ball at ground level and sort of get those crumbing goals, is they just bomb it in long, hoping that, we've got, 2 or 3 200-centimetre guys down there. Let's just hope that they take a mark with. I think that's another area we need to work on. Everyone's aware of that. I think everyone at the club is as well. So, look, back to the positives, though. Biggest news coming out of our men's club champion night was the awarding of the Merritt Murray Medal to key defender and co-captain Harris Andrews. And these sorts of awards are predominantly won by midfielders. Like, very rarely you see a key position player, let alone a defender, winning a big award. But the Big Chief broke down a huge barrier after a stellar season where he deserves some more recognition from outside of club circles, media, Australian selectors and so forth. The huge rise of Jack Payne certainly enabled Harris to go out there each week and just play his natural game, something that freed him up to our advantage, and it showed on the scoreboard throughout 2023 as numerous opposition forward groups are left wanting on a weekly basis. And he's also only 26, and it feels like he's been around forever, but he's 26 and he's yet to hit his peak physical form yet. We all know the big guys take a bit longer too. So look at AFL when he gets there, right? He's going to be an absolute, he's going to be one of the biggest superstars defenders to go. And I do want to talk about his performance in the grand final and how it was reported by the media. He kept his opponent to a single kick, which from memory was a grubber that did bugger all anyway. Yet the media somehow managed to overhype Billy Frampton's contribution to Collingwood's victory and claim he blunted Harris's influence, blah, blah, blah. Let's be real here. Had we won the game, all the talk would have been about how Frampton had zero impact and was a key reason why his team had lost. He certainly wasn't delivering the 2 goals per game that Dan McStay had been giving him previous to injuring his knee in the prelim. So, perspective is a really fine line in the AFL media landscape. Lockie Neal capped off a top season, finishing 1 vote behind Andrews in the club champion award. Hugh McCluggage overcame a slow start to storm home in 3rd place. And he's still only 24, and like Andrews has his best footy well and truly ahead of him. The ceiling has no end as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's Huey's got a lot of good footy to come. So the other winners were Rookie of the Year, Will Ashcroft, the Marcus Ashcroft Most Professional Player Award, Lincoln McCarthy, Sean Hart, Trademark Player of the Year and Players Player of the Year awards both went to Josh Dunkley. How good is that for a first-year player at the club, you know what I mean? And Will Ashcroft, another first-year player. I know Dunkley's played previous years elsewhere at the Bulldogs, but first year with us. The Finals Player Award was a tie between Kitty Coleman and Hugh McCluggage. They were both massive. Like Kitty as well in the prelim, and the first half of the grand final was enormous. And also, life membership was presented to Darcy Gardner, an absolute stalwart of the club through some pretty difficult times. He's come through some injury issues recently to be really good in the two finals that he played late in the season, the prelim and the grand final. And yeah, so both the men's and women's drafts were expected to be somewhat quiet, sort of lived up to it. Something I really want to highlight is the contrasting styles between how the recruiters at each program look to acquire talent. The women's team regularly finds absolute gems amongst the local Queensland footy community, whereas the men's team appears to look away from home more often than not. Victoria, Western Australia, a fair bit. Far be it for me to criticise list managers and recruiters who do the job for a living, but there are some highly respected young Queensland boys coming through the system who just don't appear to get a look in. And we've got guys like Gary Kipwood, Harris Andrews, club captain, Ben Keys in previous years who's gone on to play some really good footy at the Crows. You got Noah Cumberland down at the Tigers. Mabior Chol's been at a couple of clubs, but he's a pretty highly talented guy. So the Queensland system's really good. Our academy system's really good. So I hope we do look sort of a bit more at that. I mean, Bruce Revel as well now getting on the list sort of proves that there's some good guys still floating around coming through. Look, anyway, I'll digress. The men's draft saw us going initially with a fair to medium bunch of selections. However, we did do some live trading of picks on the two nights and got our hands on some good youngsters with a seemingly big emphasis on size in the forward group for the future. We got Logan Morris, 191 centimetre forward from Western Jets. Absolute machine at taking contested marks. Seen a little bit of him live and seen a lot of highlights. The guy, he gets in there and he hits the packs hard, comes out with the ball. Got Luke Lloyd, 193 centimetre forward from Sandringham Dragons. I would assume he would have played some footy with Will Ashcroft and definitely played with Levi Ashcroft, who's hopefully coming in a year's time to the club. We've got Zane Zakostelski, 196 centimetre key position ruck. Played a bit down back as well. He's from Claremont. Played a lot of Colts footy for them this year, but also played some senior games. Still working on his game a bit, but he's a big sort of potential talent for the future. Again, guys his size take a long time to really hit their peak. And we also got Reece Torrent, 184 centimetre winger, midfielder from Peel Thunder, which is the Fremantle Dockers waffle team. And look, all four boys look great and will bolster our stocks for years to come, particularly if we can be solid in regards to player retention and continuity of our strong culture. Morris in particular is known to be, as I said, a big physical presence. And that contested marking area is something we don't so much lack, but aren't particularly strong in either. And again, I would love to see some more Queenslanders getting an opportunity in the coming years, though, particularly when you look at how many are currently in Suns colours and the sort of the draft haul they got this year from academy guys that everyone in down south is pretty jealous of. I'm sure they'll get over it, the Collingwoods and so forth. And finally, and most recently, we had the trade period and draft for the women's comp. And as mentioned earlier, we maintained the majority of our grand final winning team, with the only losses being Phoebe Monahan, who retired after a very solid career at 3 clubs, and Michaela Pauger, who requested a trade to GWS. Taylor Smith, Courtney Hodder and Chucky Mullins all re-signed with the club not long after winning the Premiership, meaning that 19 of our 21 from grand final, they are all staying on. And that's new territory for us, and a huge nod to how much work is put into maintaining good relationships amongst good people within the playing and coaching groups. And other changes, Kiara Helia is now a Swan. Ella Smith heads to the Suns in a 3-club deal. That saw former Lion Kalinda Howarth become a Magpie. Courtney Murphy joins Pauger at the Giants, and Annalie McKee, who actually previously played for my daughter's club here in Geelong, was traded to the Bulldogs. Caitlin Wendland and Brooke Sheridan were the only delistings. And we did bring in a couple of really talented young ladies from the West Coast Eagles. So yeah, in a trade that also involved Geelong, we got Sinead Davison, who's an outside mid, bit of a ball carrier who uses the ball really well, and Eleanor Hartill is a 23-year-old standing 185 centimetres, and she's played 2 seasons for 16 games with the Eagles. And yeah, Sinead Davidson, just having a bit of a look now. Sorry, looking away from the camera. Um, they say that Brianna Brock said actually that she likes to break the lines and create great run on the outside. And yeah, also as part of that trade, Bella Smith headed to Geelong. So interestingly, for a club that had, I think, 3 Smith girls unrelated in the women's team, then we had Archie, Eli, and I'm having a mental blank. Someone else in the men's. God, it's shocking. We now only have Taylor Smith left in the ladies out of all the Smith family members that were all unrelated to each other. Um, so yeah, but look, just getting back to the women's trade and sort of that side of things, I do want to say something about how we said to be regularly rated by clubs from Victoria and elsewhere. Port Adelaide have had a few cracks at us, and the Giants, and no, the Giants, the Suns definitely. Um, but personally, I don't buy into that, and I said a bit differently to everyone else, and it's probably an unpopular opinion, but it's an opinion. Doesn't mean it's right, wrong, or otherwise. The way I see it is, if a player doesn't want to be at our club, I see no point in crying over spilled milk. No one's forcing him to stay or leave, so just point them in the direction of the door, wish them well, get someone in who wants to be a part of what we've got and wants to help bring our club forward in the future. And something that really triggered this for me is seeing how well our current Premiership group has bonded and stayed together, but also to move a Kalinda Howarth, as I mentioned earlier, from the Suns to Collingwood. That's now her third club. And if you look back at the vast majority of players we've lost to trades since the comp began, they've generally moved on to a third club not long after, meaning they aren't stayers in the first place. And none of them have really set the world on fire long term. They've had their moments. Look, Talia Randall's probably at North, she's probably the biggest exception to that trend, and could very easily have become a Premiership player this year had she not been playing against us in the grand final, obviously. But yeah, she's become a really good, solid player. I think she was only about 17 or 18 when she played for us anyway. So, and as one of the taller sort of players, we never really got to see the best of her. That came a bit later. So other than that, yeah, can't really think of anyone else that's really been a consistent performer after leaving our club. Obviously, Emily Bates, Greta Bodie, and Jessie Wardlaw are all a work in progress, and anyone that's left at the end of this season as well. So, well, that remains to be seen. I think Emily Bates won Hawthorn's best and fairest, but that doesn't mean a lot considering that they weren't that good. I want to say something too about Hawthorn and Bates and Bodie being there. Now, I look back, and this is probably my funniest moment of the season for the women's team. They're playing Hawthorn. Half time, Hawthorn were doing pretty well. Seemed to have, I won't say our measure, but seemed to just have that little idea of trying a few things that were working against us. And one of their players got interviewed at half time. I can't remember who it was. Don't really care. It was probably the skipper, Tilly Lucas Rod, I think. And she was giggling away, having a bit of a laugh and going, oh, yeah, we've got intel on Brisbane and inside information. We know everything about them. We know how they play. We know what to do to stop them. Laughed her head off. And I knew at that moment that that's where Hawthorn was going to lose the game. That cockiness, that arrogance, that we know what to do. Brisbane don't cop that. The Brisbane girls, the Brisbane coaching staff, they feed off that. And as we saw, that's what happened. So, look, getting back to that, I guess the pillaging and raiding, my point of view being a bit different to the majority, that's my rant. As you all know, I always try to find positives rather than play the woe is us card. Not saying other people are, but yeah, I try to look at the brighter side of life when it comes to football sort of things. And as I said, someone doesn't want to be there. Let's get in someone who does. It's not going to. The world's not going to stop. The sky's not going to fall on our heads. And as been proven, those who choose to leave the club generally don't become all-time greats of the game. So, look, sort of women's draft, all 5 of our selected players came from Queensland, and 4 of them are Lions Academy graduates. So this is a great sign that the Queensland Footy Factory and our academy system are both in full swing, producing plenty of top-end talent. And I've got a bit of involvement in the female football space down here in Victoria, but you keep hearing so much about how the massive growth area Australia-wide is female football, but specifically in Queensland, the Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, those sort of areas, parts of Brisbane, it's just phenomenal, like the percentage of growth in that area, and obviously us, and to some extent the Suns are reaping the rewards of that, probably more so us at this stage, having won a couple of premierships full of Queenslanders. And yeah, obviously we're going to win a hell of a lot more because, you know, we got good players and good coaches. So at the draft, we picked up Sophie Peters, a hybrid mid-forward. She's sort of a mid-sized sort of player. Key defender and sometimes ruck, Indiana Williams. Now, they're both from Maroochydore up on the sunny coast. Got Rania, sorry if I get that wrong, Crozier. She's a key position player who can comfortably play at both ends. She's from Aspley Hornets, the home club of Harris Andrews, and I think Eric Hipwood might have played there a bit. So a couple of our former men's players, Liam Dawson in particular, still play footy there. So we've got a bit of a connection with that club. And we got medium-sized mid-forwards, Jacinta Baldwick from Cooperoo and Evie Long from Sandgate. I think Evie, I don't believe, spent any time at our academy, but look, she may have. I just haven't seen any information anywhere to suggest that. So look, hopefully we'll see all 5 get some game time next season, although with so many premiership stars, and yes, I'm using the word stars. I know that triggers some people, but they are stars. They're still at the club, and that makes competition for spots pretty hectic for next season and beyond. And in my opinion, that's what we need if we're to remain at the top of the tree. So onwards and upwards with that. I'm still over the moon and buzzing from the women's grand final win. It was great to be a part of it. Unfortunately, I couldn't stick around for the victory lap and to catch up with any of the players afterwards. So I had to go to work a couple of hours after the game finished. So, and yeah, I don't live in Melbourne. I live an hour down the highway or so. So unfortunately, that sucks for me, but I'm so glad that they got to win and so glad that all of our fans in Victoria got to see the girls after the game, and then they had the meet and greet in Queensland a few days later. So that's really, really good. Now, that's enough for me for 2023. So I'll finish up by wishing everyone a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I know I'm definitely going to enjoy the final days of this year, reflecting on the great performance of our club at VFL, which we made it through a couple of weeks of the finals. AFL lost the grand final by 4 points when we led with 2 minutes to go. And AFLW, where we won the Premiership after being in the top 4 for pretty much the whole season. And yeah, I'm wishing like crazy that we can go a step further and win a hat-trick of flags in 2024, and maybe our academy teams and the Queensland junior state teams will get some silverware in the cabinet as well for themselves. So, you know, onwards and upwards for Queensland footy, as long as it's not the Suns. Yeah, and I'll be back just prior to the first pre-season game or just after it, one of the two. And as I said, hopefully get some special guests on, maybe some former players, I'll get Alicia and Rebecca from the Lions supporter group to come on and do some chats with me, and a couple of super fans as well with some good stories to tell. And until then, have a wonderful holiday period and go Lions.